Fargo, North Dakota, Monday, October 26, 2009. 8:40 a.m. 49-year-old periodontist Philip Gattuso drops his 3-year-old daughter Kennedy off at daycare.
Philip has been Kennedy's sole caregiver for the past 8 months, since March when his wife Valerie died from complications following heart surgery.
Philip currently only works part-time, having recently sold his dentistry practice. Yet that Monday morning, he has a 10:30 conference call scheduled with a consultant.
Philip misses the teleconference. He doesn't email or call with an explanation as to why. By 6 o'clock that evening, he also fails to pick up his daughter from daycare.
A worker at Kennedy's Montessori school calls family friend Julie Willard and informs her of the situation.
Around 7 o'clock, Julie calls Philip's next-door neighbor, Charles Bramall, and asks him to go over and check the Gattuso residence.
Bramall grabs a ladder and scales their common fence to check on Philip's property. He doesn't see Philip's Porsche in the garage, so he assumes no one's home and leaves.
By 7:30, a daycare employee drops Kennedy Gattuso off at Julie's house because no one she's contacted has heard from Philip.
Minutes later, Julie meets Charles at Philip's condo. They use an unlocked back door to gain entry.
There's flipped-over furniture and open drawers everywhere. Julie and Charles make their way to the master bedroom. There, they find Philip Gattuso on the floor with blood pooled around his head.
Charles checks Philip and finds he's not breathing. He calls 911.
Fargo police arrive on the scene just before 8 p.m.
Investigators enter Philip's bedroom and immediately see bloody footprints tracked across the carpet to where his body lies. It appears he's been bludgeoned in the back of the head.
It's clearly a homicide, yet detectives do not locate a murder weapon at the scene. They suspect the bloody footprints belonging to Philip's attacker. However, CSI is unable to lift a full footprint.
Detective Paul Lease takes note of blood spots on the bedroom floor and walls, a broken closet door, and a shattered mirror and lamp. It appears Gattuso struggled with his attacker before he was overpowered.
As officers spread throughout the condo, they find indications of theft.
In the basement, Detective Lee spots an empty box for a new computer and a Panasonic camera box that's also empty. The items appear to have been stolen. Empty money bands on the floor in Philip's work area suggest money had been stolen as well.
However, there are no signs of forced entry. All of the doors and windows are locked, except for the door leading to the garage.
Philip's 1999 Porsche Boxster is missing. A vehicle records check reveals that the convertible is the only Boxster in Cass County. It should be easy to spot. Detectives make finding the car a top priority.
Law enforcement spends the next 24 hours gathering evidence from the condo.
Looking into robbery as the primary motive behind the murder, police contact Philip Gattuso's brother, Roy, for information.
Roy tells investigators that, aside from the Porsche, Philip wasn't flashy and didn't wear real expensive jewelry, though it was common for him to keep several $1,000s of cash at home. He can't think of anyone who would want his brother dead.
On Tuesday afternoon, October 27th, police speak with Philip's mother-in-law, Sharon Kirkpatrick, who's been mentioned as a potential guardian for Kennedy.
Sharon explains that she, her husband Gene, and their other daughter Reagan are already en route to Fargo to discuss custody of Kennedy with Roy Gattuso and Cass County Social Services the following day.
Reagan Kirkpatrick is subsequently granted temporary custody and allowed to bring Kennedy back to Oklahoma.
Meanwhile, on Wednesday, October 28th, the state medical examiner's office conducts an autopsy on Philip Gattuso.
The coroner determines that the cause of death was multiple blows to the head with a hammer, and that death occurred Monday, October 26th, between 7 a.m. and the early afternoon hours.
Over the next few days, Fargo police interview owners and employees of the local businesses near Philip Gattuso's condo.
Before long, detectives visit the Bowler, a bowling alley 1 block south of Gattuso's home.
Surveillance cameras facing the Bowler's parking lot recorded some suspicious activity on the morning of October 26th.
At 7:29 a.m. on the 26th, the footage shows a black Chevy pickup with a flatbed U-Haul trailer attached pull into the parking lot. The driver exits the vehicle, then heads on foot in the direction of Gattuso's condo complex.
Security footage from a nearby A&W restaurant offers a view of Gattuso's garage and front door. At 7:47 a.m., the video shows the same person from the Bowler parking lot walking near Gattuso's residence.
The homicide team combines what they learned from surveillance footage with eyewitness statements to construct a timeline of the day Philip Gattuso was murdered.
Jim Tandesky, the owner of the Bowler, tells detectives that when he arrived at work around 9 a.m. on October 26, he saw the same pickup with a flatbed trailer from the video in his parking lot. The truck had Oklahoma license plates.
At 10:52 a.m., the Bowler cameras catch a light-colored car matching the size and shape of Philip's Porsche backing into the parking garage at Philip's condo complex. Minutes later, the pickup truck and trailer left the Bowler parking lot and backed into the same garage.
Gattuso's neighbor, Jamie Viker, tells authorities that around 11 a.m. on the 26th, she went outside to empty the trash and spoke with a blonde-haired 20-something white male who was lying under the trailer.
The man told her the car on top of the trailer had been purchased on eBay and that he was delivering it to the buyer. The car was covered with a black tarp, but Jamie could still make out that it was silver and had Boxster written on the back of it.
At 11:31 a.m., surveillance footage from the bowler shows the pickup leaving the parking garage with a silver car on top of its attached trailer.
Around that time, Tom Frankel was on a treadmill at a medical facility near the bowler. He recalls seeing a dark blue extended cab pickup hauling a trailer containing a tarp-covered vehicle toward Interstate 29.
Police now believe the key to catching Philip Gattuso's killer is tracking down his car.
At 8:15 p.m. that Wednesday night, Fargo Police Detective Paula Turns receives a call from a man named Darwin Lusty.
Lusty tells Detective Turns that he and his friend, Ray Griffith, saw a dark Chevy pickup with Oklahoma plates at Glacial Lake's rest area along I-29.
Less than an hour later, Ray Griffith contacts Detective Turns to offer additional information. He describes the truck driver as a white male, 6 feet tall, 45 to 50 years of age. The man was slender, wavy brown hair, had a flat face, and no facial hair.
Ray explains how the driver seemed nervous and kept making sure the tarp was covering the license plate and the wheels of the car he was holding.
Ray had a quick conversation with the driver who told him someone bought the car online for $12,000. He'd gone to Canada to pick it up and was now on his way back to deliver it.
Lieutenant Pat Klaus visits Glacial Lake's rest area, which is just south of the North Dakota-South Dakota border.
Klaus reviews surveillance footage from October 26, which depicts the pickup driver entering the rest stop bathroom with an empty black garbage bag and what appears to be a change of clothing. A red stain is clearly visible on the left side of his pant leg.
A short time later, cameras capture the driver leaving the rest area in the change of clothes he was carrying. The black garbage bag now has items in it, presumably clothing the driver was previously wearing.
Further review of the rest stop video shows that the rented U-Haul trailer has an Oklahoma license plate number. Now, homicides detectives need to locate the driver.
Thursday, October 29th, Fargo Police Detective Pat Klaus contacts an agent from the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation for assistance getting information about the U-Haul.
Oklahoma authorities quickly discover the trailer had been rented from a facility in Oklahoma City at 3:49 p.m. on October 23, 2009. It was returned on the afternoon of October 27th. The rental records provide the license plate number of a 1999 Chevy Silverado the renter used to haul the trailer.
Law enforcement procures a DMV photograph of the Silverado's registered owner, a 41-year-old Michael Allen Nakvinda. There's a definite resemblance between the DMV photo and the surveillance images from the rest stop.
Early Saturday morning, October 31st, Fargo police issue a warrant for Nakvinda's arrest.
Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Saturday, October 31st, 2009, 7:52 a.m. Fargo police and a SWAT team surround the home of Michael Nakvinda, who lives with his mother, Edith Wade.
A SWAT negotiator calls Nakvinda on the landline and asks him to come out. Nakvinda soon surrenders and is taken into custody without incident.
When officers inform Nakvinda that he's a suspect in a murder investigation, he claims he has no idea what they were talking about.
Fargo detective Paul Leese attempts to interview Nakvinda. All he'll say is that he's never been to Fargo. He refuses to speak any further without a lawyer present, so he's transported to county jail.
In the meantime, investigators run a background check on Michael Nakvinda.
Nakvinda has a criminal history dating back over 20 years. Police are puzzled by how the violent ex-con has zero connection to Philip Gattuso. It doesn't make sense that he traveled 1,000 miles to specifically burglarize Gattuso's home, steal his car, and most importantly, kill Gattuso himself, of all people.
The authorities soon execute a search warrant on the residence Nakvinda shares with his mother.
Inside Michael's bedroom, cops find paperwork for 2 storage unit rentals. Underneath his bed, they find $2,500 cash stashed in a coffee can.
Fargo detective Paula Turns conducts a brief interview with Edith in the backseat of a squad car outside the residence. Edith is surprised by the cash discovery, as she doesn't believe her son would have that kind of money.
Turns starts mentioning the names of individuals involved in the case from Philip Gattuso's sphere. When Turns brings up Gattuso's father-in-law, Gene Kirkpatrick, Edith says Kirkpatrick had hired Michael in the past to do odd jobs.
Around 4:30 that Saturday afternoon, Detective Turns contacts Gene Kirkpatrick. She asks him and his wife Sharon to meet her at the police station in their town, Jones, Oklahoma, for questioning.
Kirkpatrick explains that they've just returned from Fargo with their granddaughter Kennedy and agree to come down.
At 6 o'clock, Fargo detective Paul Lees and agent Jerry Cusack conduct a tape-recorded interview with Gene Kirkpatrick.
Gene readily admits tensions exist between him and Philip Gattuso, which stem from the way he believes Philip mistreated his daughter, Valerie, during her prolonged illness.
Investigators tell Kirkpatrick his former handyman, Michael Nakvinda, has been arrested for Gattuso's murder.
Detectives then explain that Nakvinda had implicated him in the murder, which is a bluff. The ruse works. Kirkpatrick soon admits to having conversations with Nakvinda about wanting Philip Gattuso gone or dead, so that his family could raise Kennedy in Oklahoma City.
During one conversation, Nakvinda claimed to know someone who could kill Philip for $100,000, but Kirkpatrick told him he couldn't pay that. Eventually, in a separate conversation, he and Nakvinda agreed on a price of $13,000 to take Philip out. $3,000 would be paid up front, and the remaining $10,000 at a later date.
According to Kirkpatrick, before he took a trip to Fargo in September 2009, Nakvinda gave him a video camera and instructed him to film Gattuso's home for reconnaissance, which he did.
Kirkpatrick further admits that he told Nakvinda that Gattuso had no work appointments on his calendar for Monday, October 26, 2009, which ended up being the day Gattuso was killed.
Still, Kirkpatrick maintains that he never gave his handyman the green light to follow through with the murder for hire.
October 31st, 2009, 5 days after widowed periodontist Philip Gattuso was bludgeoned to death inside his Fargo, North Dakota condo, police arrest Michael Nakvinda.
Detectives interrogate Gattuso's father-in-law, Gene Kirkpatrick, in Oklahoma City. When officers bluff Kirkpatrick that Nakvinda implicated him in the murder, he reveals that he and Nakvinda, his former handyman, had discussions about killing Gattuso and had even gone over a fee for doing so.
On November 1st, the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation gets a tip from James Young, the owner of a storage facility.
Young says he saw Michael Nakvinda's picture on the news and believes Nakvinda paid him cash for a storage space at his facility on October 27. Surveillance footage soon confirms the renter was in fact Nakvinda.
Police search the unit Nakvinda rented, C-28, the following morning. Inside, they find Philip Gattuso's Porsche Boxster covered by a tarp.
Inside the trunk, agents find various items from Gattuso's home, including a computer monitor and loose jewelry. Inside the vehicle, they find a bloody hammer, which tests positive for Gattuso's blood.
Following the discoveries, Gene Kirkpatrick is arrested at home and charged with conspiracy to commit murder and burglary.
Both Kirkpatrick and Nakvinda are eventually extradited from Oklahoma to North Dakota and held on $1 million cash bail each at Cass County Jail.
Many friends in the family of Gene Kirkpatrick are unconvinced of his guilt. In February 2010, a longtime friend posts Gene's bail.
As prosecutors prep for trial, they must solve the puzzle of how the lives of an ex-con, a concerned grandfather, and a successful periodontist intersected in murder.
Michael Nakvinda was born in June 1968 and raised in Oklahoma City. His father's a car salesman. His mother's a seamstress. His talent for craftsmanship rubs off on him. As a young man, he works on furniture. However, he eventually turns to a life of crime.
In 1988, Michael is a married 20-year-old father when he pleads guilty to concealing stolen property, which lands him 3 years in jail. Soon after his release, Nakvinda receives 4 more years when he's found in possession of a pistol.
In 1994, Nakvinda commits a series of blitz-style home invasion robberies, making off with jewelry, drugs, large sums of cash. He eventually pleads guilty to 1 count of kidnapping, 9 counts of robbery with a firearm. He receives a 20-year sentence, yet is released in October 2002 after serving just 8 years.
Nakvinda returns to Oklahoma City, lives with his mother, and begins a handyman business, which is how he eventually meets Gene Kirkpatrick.
Gene Kirkpatrick was born in August 1946 and grows up in Oklahoma. At 20, he enlists in the Marine Corps Reserves, where he serves as a field radio operator and wireman.
Following his honorable discharge in 1972, Gene works in the telecommunications industry. He and his wife Sharon raised their 2 daughters, Reagan and Valerie.
Valerie Kirkpatrick meets Philip Gattuso in 2002. A year later, she becomes his 3rd wife.
Valerie gives birth to daughter Kennedy in April of 2006. Approximately 16 months later, in August of 2007, she undergoes heart surgery. Unfortunately, her health deteriorates in the hospital to the point where her toes and then eventually her leg are amputated.
Valerie moves back to Oklahoma City to be near her family while she rehabilitates, but Philip remains in Fargo. According to Valerie's father, Gene, Philip becomes distant during the time apart, which adds more stress to his wife's situation.
Eventually, Philip sells his practice in order to join the family in Oklahoma. However, under his contract, he must stay on for 6 months to help transition his patients to a new dentist.
On March 30th, 2009, Valerie dies of prolonged complications from her heart surgery.
Gene takes Valerie's death especially hard. He's convinced that Philip was weak in dealing with his daughter's illness, and he had hemmed and hawed over medical decisions that could have saved her life.
Gene then concludes that Philip is unfit to raise his granddaughter, Kennedy. He wants his daughter, Reagan, Kennedy's aunt, to have permanent custody so they can raise Kennedy in Oklahoma City.
While Reagan looks into the legal remedies to gain custody of Kennedy, Gene conspires with his handyman, Michael Nakvinda, to guarantee the change in his granddaughter's guardianship through deceit, murder, and a proposed $13,000 payday.
Fargo, North Dakota, Tuesday, November 30th, 2010, 9:30 a.m. The murder trial of Michael Nakvinda gets underway at Cass County District Court.
The state relies on security videos and eyewitness testimony. They lay out a chain of evidence ending at a storage unit Nakvinda rented in Oklahoma City, where he hid Philip Gattuso's Porsche Boxster, which had the murder weapon in its back seat.
The defense maintains that Nakvinda was never in Fargo. They argue that Gene Kirkpatrick merely paid him to pick up Gattuso's Porsche, which Kirkpatrick had told him he'd purchased.
The defense further alleges that Kirkpatrick directed Nakvinda to a residence in Wahpeton, North Dakota, where he spent the night of October 25th. He woke up the next morning there, and his truck had already been loaded with Gattuso's Porsche by the homeowner, who had retrieved it from Fargo.
Prosecutors counter, arguing that the timeline established by security video and eyewitnesses did not support a trip to Wahpeton.
Debbie Baker, one of Nakvinda's clients, testifies about how before the murder, Michael told her he could get rid of Philip Gattuso and would use a hammer to do the deed.
Baker's testimony leads Nakvinda to take the stand in his own defense. His retort is to claim that his ex-friend and employer, Gene Kirkpatrick, knew about his criminal past and is framing him.
The jury doesn't buy Nakvinda's argument. On December 10th, 2010, they find him guilty of murder and all of the charges related to the property he stole from Bill Gattuso.
The following month, Nakvinda is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Fargo, North Dakota, Thursday, July 21st. The prosecution of Gene Kirkpatrick begins at Cass County District Court.
The state uses Kirkpatrick's initial police interview and the revelations he made as the crux of the case against him.
The recorded interview paints a clear picture of how, after his daughter Valerie died in March 2009, Kirkpatrick wanted his granddaughter Kennedy to be raised in Oklahoma, not in Fargo with her father.
The state alleges that custody over Kennedy was the motive behind Kirkpatrick's conspiring with Nakvinda to murder Philip Gattuso. They argue the near $2,500 in cash that had been recovered from Michael Nakvinda's bedroom was in fact part of the payment from Kirkpatrick to kill Gattuso.
Gattuso's friend Julie Willard testifies. She explains how Philip's in-laws hated him.
Prosecutors back up Willard's statement by asserting that Gene Kirkpatrick told more than 100 people about his frustrations with his son-in-law.
The defense now counters. They claim that even though Kirkpatrick ranted about his son-in-law at times, provided Nakvinda with footage he recorded at Gattuso's condo and discussed the cost and probability of a hit.
On Thursday, July 28, 2011, the jury finds Gene Kirkpatrick guilty of conspiracy to commit intentional murder and burglary.
3 months later, a judge sentences Kirkpatrick to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Cleveland, Ohio, Monday, September 24th, 2012, 9 p.m. 28-year-old Shatisha Sheely calls her mother, Kim, and tells her she's going to stop by the following day to borrow some money.
Shatisha's unemployed and now lives alone. Her 12-year-old daughter has been living with relatives since Shatisha's recent legal troubles. Kim is looking forward to the visit from her daughter. However, Shatisha doesn't show up the next day or the days after that. She doesn't call either.
Kim Sheely soon calls Cleveland PD, who dispatches an officer to her residence to take a missing persons report.
Weeks passed with no word from Shatisha or police. With zero evidence of foul play, law enforcement must consider the possibility that she doesn't want to be found.
That December, Shatisha's brother, Dontel, is shot and killed during a home invasion. When Shatisha fails to show up for the funeral, her mother fears something terrible has happened.
Cleveland, Ohio, Monday, July 1st, 2013. The 4th District Police Department takes a missing persons report on 38-year-old customer service rep Angela Deskins from her sister, Krishna.
Apparently, Angela was last seen in the 3300 block of East 87th Street on June 7th. Christina tells an officer that Angela usually wore blue jeans, a black shirt and glasses. but otherwise doesn't have much information to impart.
Angela has a warrant out for her arrest for missing a court hearing. There's some speculation Angela has skipped town because of it.
Cleveland, Ohio, Wednesday, July 10th, 2013, 8 a.m. Derek Minor drops off his stepdaughter Sherelda Terry at East Clark Elementary School, where she has a summer job.
18-year-old Sherelda is known for being studious and religious. She even started her own praise dance ministry at Antioch Christian Fellowship Church.
Sherelda finishes her shift around 1 p.m. and starts walking home.
Sherelda never makes it to her parents' house. Her mother, stepfather, and biological father, Van Terry, go into an immediate panic. Not only does the family report Sherelda missing to the police, but they also start passing out flyers and photos of her around town.
Even though there's no evidence Shatisha Shealy, Angela Deskins, or Sherelda Terry have met with foul play, their families have cause to worry about their safety. The city of Cleveland has recently been inundated with violent crime.
Just 2 months prior, in May 2013, 3 Cleveland area women, Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina DeJesus, escaped from the home of 53-year-old bus driver Ariel Castro after a decade of captivity.
2 months prior to that, 3 women were found dead inside abandoned properties on East 93rd Street in Cleveland. Each victim had either been beaten, strangled, or both. Their murders remained unsolved, and the killer remains at large.
And then there's the case of Anthony Sowell, the so-called Cleveland Strangler. Sowell killed 11 women between May 2007 and September 2009 and buried their dead bodies around his duplex on Imperial Avenue.
Given the violence that's plagued the Cleveland area, people begin to wonder if Shatisha, Angela, and Sherelda have been kidnapped or possibly even murdered.
East Cleveland, Ohio, Friday, July 19th, 2013, 9 a.m. Cable company worker Mickey Stovall Brown calls East Cleveland police to report a foul odor.
According to Stovall Brown, the smell is coming from one of the garages behind his workplace at the corner of Shaw and Hayden Avenue. Several neighbors have noticed the smell as well.
Stovall Brown thinks it may be a dead animal, a definite possibility for the neighborhood. East Cleveland has the highest poverty rate in Cuyahoga County, and several areas littered with abandoned or decaying properties.
Officers respond to the scene but find the garage in question locked. They contact the owner of the apartments above the East Cleveland Cable Company, but he's unable to come by and open it.
A neighbor tells the officers the person who normally parks in the garage is a friend of hers named Michael Madison. She calls Madison and tells him that he needs to come open his garage because something isn't right inside. He pauses and tells her he isn't there and doesn't offer any further assistance.
Firefighters eventually break into the shared garage. Patrolman Bashan Williams searches inside and traces the smell to the area next to where Madison parks his 1983 Oldsmobile Cutlass.
Between the car and the wall, Officer Williams finds a large, heavy garbage bag underneath a pink covering.
Williams tears open the garbage bag and 6 bags within, only to uncover the decomposing flesh of a partially nude African-American female. He rushes out of the garage and informs his superiors that they're dealing with a crime scene and potential homicide.
East Cleveland Police Chief Ralph Spots responds to the scene with a search warrant for the garage and Michael Madison's second-floor apartment.
The authorities run a records check on Madison. They learn he's a registered sex offender in Cuyahoga County and has spent 4 years in prison after pleading guilty to attempted in February 2002. In May 2013, he'd been charged with marijuana possession, but didn't serve any time in jail.
Inside the garage, police focus their attention on Madison's car. They pop the trunk and discover a shovel and additional garbage bags identical to the ones that had been used to wrap the victim's body.
Inside Madison's apartment, investigators find additional incriminating evidence.
Inside a hallway closet, investigators find maggots and biological material from a decomposing body, as if the body from the garage had been contained within, then moved down to the area where police found it.
Cops suspect Madison isn't too far from the area. They decide to go to the address listed under his name in the sex offender registry, which happens to be his mother's house.
Cleveland, Ohio, Friday, July 19th, 2013, 5:30 p.m. Police descend on Madison's mother's house. Michael is inside, but he refuses to come out.
A standoff ensues for the next 2 hours. The authorities call in SWAT and a tank with a battering rod. Once they knock the door down, Madison surrenders to law enforcement. He's taken into custody and transported to East Cleveland Jail.
Detectives attempt to question Madison, but he's uncooperative. He denies having any involvement with the woman found in his garage or being involved in any kind of crime whatsoever. When asked if he's claimed any additional victims, Madison refuses to indicate one way or another.
Meanwhile, back at the crime scene, officials from multiple law enforcement agencies have gathered, including the FBI, Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation, or BCI, and police from Cleveland and East Cleveland. they begin interviewing neighbors, hoping to get a sense of who Michael Madison is.
One neighbor tells officers Michael was okay when they first met, but then started getting into conflicts with all the women he knew. Another neighbor, Eric Wilson, explains how Madison was a fixture on the streets of their East Cleveland neighborhood.
Wilson says he ran into Madison a few weeks back and noticed that he was covered in scratches, allegedly from a confrontation he'd had with a woman.
According to Wilson, Madison would say things he found demented, like how much he hated women, so that he wanted to attack them in the same manner Cleveland Strangler Anthony Sowell.
Cops soon learned Michael Madison told several people he admired the convicted serial killer.
Nathania Crosby tells detectives how Madison freaked her out on a 4th of July gathering by speaking reverently about Sowell, and she'd actually warned him to stay away from her 19-year-old daughter.
Multiple teenage girls from the neighborhood tell officers that Michael Madison persistently paid attention to them, pursued them, and asked them out. Apparently, he even became aggressive when he didn't know where one of the girls was.
Altogether, the stories about Madison indicates to law enforcement they're dealing with a serial predator.
From September 2012 to July 2013, 3 African-American women, Shatisha Sheely, Angela Deskins, and Sherelda Terry, vanished without a trace from Cleveland, Ohio. Law enforcement works late into the pre-dawn hours of Saturday, July 20th, processing the crime scenes inside Madison's garage and apartment.
That Saturday afternoon, investigators fan out into the neighborhood. In an overgrown, empty lot 150 feet away from Madison's garage, they find a second female body wrapped in garbage bags.
Officers search the abandoned house next to the lot. Inside the basement, they find the dead body of yet another woman wrapped in garbage bags.
The basement window is broken, which leads detectives to suspect that someone actually just tossed the bag through the window like trash. Coincidentally, the abandoned house, like the lot next to it, is visible from Michael Madison's front door.
The 2 new victims, like the first, are in a state of severe decomposition. However, investigators can determine that they're also African American.
All 3 of the women have been posed in a fetal position and identically concealed in the same kind of garbage bags, which would indicate that they all died at the hands of the same killer.
On Monday, July 22nd, Michael Madison is arraigned in East Cleveland Municipal Court.
Madison is charged with 3 counts of aggravated murder and 3 counts of kidnapping for the 3 women's bodies discovered near his home. He doesn't enter a plea, and his bond is set at $6 million, or $1 million for each of his 6 charges.
Meanwhile, the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office autopsies the 3 Jane Does. That Monday, fingerprints positively identified the woman found in the basement of the abandoned home as 38-year-old Angela Deskin, who had been missing since July 1st.
Police investigate the possible connections between Deskins and Madison.
Deskins had plenty of opportunities to run into Michael Madison on the streets of East Cleveland. One of her friends tells detectives she and Madison frequented the same corner store and gas station hangout spots.
Considering Madison is known around the neighborhood as the Weed Man, it's also possible that he and Deskins knew each other from drug deals, as Deskins had been arrested in the past for marijuana possession.
By Monday evening, the Jane Doe found in the overgrown lot is identified using tattoo verification and fingerprint analysis. It's 28-year-old Shatisha Sheely, who's been missing since September 2012.
Like Angela Deskins, Shatisha could have come into contact with Michael Madison through his pot dealings, as she had a minor marijuana charge in 2010.
By Tuesday, July the 23rd, the medical examiner confirms that the victim from Madison's garage is 18-year-old Sherelda Terry, who went missing just 13 days prior.
Unlike Deskins and Sheely, Sherelda Terry didn't live alone, spend time in East Cleveland, or smoke pot. Investigators wonder how her path ever crossed with Michael Madison.
Cleveland, Ohio, late July 2013. Michael Madison waives his right to an attorney and allows investigators to question him at Cuyahoga County Jail.
Over the course of 3 days, officers confront Madison over the 3 dead women found within 150 feet of his front door. They ask him what encounters he had had with the victims before their deaths. At times, he tries to answer their questions, but admits to having little recollection of what happened with them.
The woman Madison remembers most clearly is Shatisha Sheely, who he met through a friend. Sheely had apparently gone to his apartment multiple times.
According to Madison, one night he caught Sheely rummaging through his clothes drawers and asked her what she was doing. She responded by saying, "F you," so he grabbed her by the neck, pushed her into a corner, then held her throat until she fell limp.
Madison says he moved Sheely's dead body to several locations within his apartment before wrapping it up and dumping it in a patch of bushes at the vacant lot.
Madison claims he has no memory of what happened with Angela Deskins. All he says is that he met her through a friend in March or April, which is months before her family considered her missing that June.
Madison remembers encountering Sherelda Terry as she was walking down the street. He lured her back to his apartment, where he claims he choked her to death and left her body in his hallway closet.
Madison seems to have forgotten Sherelda was in his closet. until her body began to smell. That's when he tied her feet and neck together, placed her, folded in half at the waist, inside multiple garbage bags, which he took down to the garage.
In late July 2013, police in Cleveland, Ohio arrest convicted sex offender Michael Madison after 3 dead bodies are found within 150 feet of his house. Police soon interview one of Madison's fellow inmates at East Cleveland Jail, Jeffrey Tucker, who reveals Madison's alleged motives for the murders.
He said, I came up with the idea, with the plan to kill people I don't know. I decided to kill anybody who acted like my baby mother or reminded them.
Tucker says he asked Madison what he would have done if he hadn't been caught. Madison supposedly responded that he would have kept committing murders.
On July 29th, the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner releases details from the autopsies of the 3 victims.
Sherelda Terry and Angela Deskins have both been strangled to death with a ligature. Shatisha Shealy's cause of death is considered homicidal violence by unspecified means. It's evidence Terry had been...
That same day, a Cuyahoga County grand jury indicts Michael Madison on 14 counts, including 6 counts of aggravated murder and 3 counts of kidnapping. Also included are charges for gross abuse of a corpse, having weapons as a convicted felon, and failing to change his address as a registered sex offender.
3 months later, the grand jury revises the 14-count indictment to include death penalty specifications for the same 6 counts of aggravated murder.
Public defenders order psychiatric evaluations of Michael Madison, hoping to establish mitigating factors that might spare him from the death penalty should he be convicted.
Forensic psychologist Dr. Daniel Davis concludes that the extreme trauma and abuse Madison experienced during his childhood resulted in him being at greater risk for psychological, behavioral, and substance abuse problems.
That prolonged abuse might have damaged the frontal lobes of Madison's brain and therefore affected his ability to plan and anticipate outcomes, self-monitor, and show good judgment. Bottom line, brain damage could have influenced Madison's behavior in committing his crimes.
What happened during Michael Madison's youth that injured his brain to the point that damage could have played a role in his alleged killings?
Michael Madison was born in October 1977 to Diane Madison, so Michael's father has no interest in being a part of his life.
Diane struggles as a single mother. In 1980, she allegedly stuffs food down 2-year-old Michael's throat, which causes him to vomit. For vomiting, she puts him in a tub of hot water. When he screams, she beats him with an extension cord.
Children and Family Services investigates that incident and several more before Michael turns 5.
He ends up in the hospital on multiple occasions for bruises, injuries, and other evidence of physical abuse.
Michael is sent to live with his maternal grandmother, who is a former heroin addict, and that situation doesn't work out either. So he's eventually returned to his mother's care, which leads to yet another hospital admission for bruising and dehydration.
Michael's home life lacks any kind of normalcy. He doesn't have a lot of interaction with other kids, and the family rarely celebrates holidays. On top of that, he changes schools often. He ends up attending Euclid High School, but claims he dropped out in the 9th grade. By the time he's 16, Michael's living a transient lifestyle, sleeping wherever he can, as long as it's not at home with his mother.
At 17, Michael earns juvenile probation following a charge of delinquency for inappropriately touching a peer.
By age 20, Madison goes to jail on a drug charge. 3 years later, in 2001, he's hauled off again for disorderly conduct and attempted possession of drugs. He's back on the streets that October and decides to move on to bigger, bolder crimes.
One night in October 2001, Michael offers to help get an 18-year-old girl a ride home from East Cleveland. As he's walking down the street, he grabs her from behind and covers her mouth.
Michael and the girl struggle as he tries to pull down her pants. He threatens to kill her if she fights or screams. Neighbors hear the young woman's cries for help and call the police, who respond swiftly to the scene and arrest the 23-year-old ex-con.
Madison ends up pleading guilty to a felony attempted in February 2002, resulting in a 4-year prison sentence.
Madison's seemingly off law enforcement's radar for the next 7 years until May 2013, when he pleads guilty to marijuana possession. 2 months after that, Deskins and Terry vanish without a trace.
Cleveland, Ohio, Monday, April 4th, 2016. The Michael Madison murder trial gets underway.
Prosecution opens its case by describing the final days of Shatisha Shealy, Angela Deskins, and Sherelda Terry. Madison confessed to killing Shealy and Terry, and also admitted to putting Terry in a garbage bag. DNA evidence connects Terry and Deskins to a closet in Madison's apartment.
Prosecutors use autopsy findings to argue that Madison strangled Terry and Deskins to death with a belt. Shealy suffered severe bruising to her face, but her cause of death was undetermined. Prosecutors also mention how Terry had been prior to death and her genitals had been mutilated.
Madison's defense team doesn't dispute that he killed all 3 women. They characterize him as a drug addict prone to fits of rage who's lived a trauma-filled life. They argue that none of the murders he committed were pre-planned.
Shantae Mahone, who dated Madison from the fall of 2012 onward, takes the stand for the prosecution.
Shantif testifies that Michael had been staying at her place just 7 houses away when Cherelda Terry's body was found in his garage.
Shantae explains how one day in July 2013, Michael showed up at her house with scratches on his body. He told her he'd been taking his car to the repair shop when a girl jumped in. They got into a fight and she scratched his face. The incident took place around the time it's believed he killed Cherelda Terry.
Another ex-girlfriend, Brittany Darby, recounts how on 2 separate occasions in 2013, she smelled something sour inside Madison's apartment.
One of those times, Brittany asked Michael about the smell. He claimed that some raccoons had died in the closets. When she asked if she could take a look, he told her it was too gross, not something she wanted to see.
Prosecutors showed Darby photos of blankets and sheets that had been used to wrap up some of the dead bodies. She identifies them as items Madison had used to prevent drafts from coming inside his French doors, separating his living room from his porch.
Michael Madison doesn't take the stand. In fact, the defense doesn't call any witnesses.
During closing statements, prosecutors hammer home the idea that Michael Madison can be outwardly charming but harbors deep hate and resentment towards women, particularly those closest to him.
The state points out the steps Madison took to cover up the killings and how he mutilated Cherelda Terry as evidence of this hatred and deception. They also assert that based on his own description of how he choked Terry, Madison had 3 to 5 minutes to rethink his actions before she actually died.
On May 5, 2016, the jury convicts Madison on all 14 counts, including the 6 counts of aggravated murder, the 3 counts of kidnapping, and the 3 counts of gross abuse of a corpse.
Drama erupts in the courtroom after Cherelda Terry's father, Van, makes his statement and looks back at Madison.
Madison responds by smiling at Van Terry from the defense table, which causes Terry to rush over and lunge at Madison. Deputies restrain Terry before he can do any damage.
On June 2nd, 2016, the judge accepts the jury's recommendation and sentences Michael Madison to the death penalty.
New Orleans, Louisiana, Friday, March 3rd, 1995, 11:05 p.m. Officer Ronnie Williams of the NOPD's 7th District arrives at Kim On for off-duty security detail.
The Vietnamese restaurant is on the far east edge of New Orleans East. 23-year-old Chow Vu and her siblings, 24-year-old Ha, 18-year-old Quoc, and 17-year-old Quang, work at the establishment, which is owned by their family.
Around 11:45, Officer Antoinette Frank, who also works out of the 7th District, arrives at the restaurant.
Frank sometimes works security at the restaurant. She's just gotten off duty and stopped by to grab some cold drinks before catching a midnight movie.
Chow happily gives Antoinette a couple of free orange juices and sends her on her way. Then she instructs her siblings to start cleaning up.
At 12:51 a.m., Antoinette calls the restaurant.
She missed her movie and hopes she can come by the restaurant to pick up some food. Chow tells Ha to make steak and fries for Antoinette on the house.
Antoinette shows up 10 minutes later with her nephew, who she introduces to the family. Chow locks the front door so no additional customers can enter and drops the key on the bar, where Ronnie Williams is holding court.
While Antoinette and her nephew eat, Chow cleans the bar top, Quoc sweeps the floor, and Ha and Quang attend to matters in the kitchen.
Antoinette's nephew gets up and uses the bathroom by the bar. When he returns, they head for the exit.
Ronnie can't find Chow's key, so Quoc uses his to let them out. Chow yells goodnight and tells Antoinette not to worry about working security the following night because Ronnie has it covered.
Around 1:30 in the morning, Chow starts counting cash, her last duty before closing shop.
She dumps more than $10,000 on a kitchen table, out of which she grabs some cash to pay Ronnie. When she walks the payment out to him, she sees headlights. Antoinette is back.
Even though Antoinette is like family to the Vus, Chow gets a bad feeling. She runs back to the kitchen, yelling to Quoc and Ronnie, "Don't let her in."
Chow grabs the money and hides it in the microwave.
Quoc watches Antoinette walk up to the front door and begins shaking it. When no one else lets her in, she opens it herself, using Chow's missing key. She heads for the back, pushing Quoc and Chow back from the entrance to the kitchen.
Antoinette tells Chow they need to talk.
When Ronnie moves towards the kitchen, gunshots ring out. Antoinette lets go of Choc and Chow and runs towards the shots.
Quoc and Chow head for the walk-in freezer. They whisper for Quang and Ha to join, but they're in shock.
Chow and Quoc hide in the freezer, but can hear voices shouting. When they peer out through the freezer window, they can see Antoinette and her nephew frantically running back and forth.
Suddenly, gunfire erupts from nearby in the kitchen. Chow and Quoc watch through the window as Antoinette and her nephew peel out of the parking lot. They remain in the freezer for several minutes until they're convinced the danger is gone.
Chow creeps into the dining area and finds Ronnie Williams motionless on the ground.
She grabs her cell phone but can't get through to 911. Then the battery dies.
Kwok volunteers to run to a nearby friend's house and call the police. And as he's leaving, he sees Hart and Kwong dead in the kitchen.
911 receives Kwok's call at 1:50 a.m. The dispatcher sends code 108, or officer in distress call, out over the radio.
Meanwhile, Antoinette Frank busts into the 7th District Police Station. She tells the desk clerk she's taking a squad car to respond to the 108.
She immediately heads back out the front door. Within minutes, she's actually the first officer on the scene, back at Kim An.
Frank enters the front door. Officers Wayne Favre and Reginald Jacques arrive seconds later. Suddenly, Chow Vu runs out the front door in hysterics, with Frank on her heels.
Frank immediately tells Favre that 3 masked gunmen were involved in the shooting and could still be on the premises.
Officer Yvonne Favre, Wayne's wife, now arrives. Chow jumps into her arms and refuses to let go.
Antoinette approaches and asks where she and her brother hid and what happened to their other siblings. Confused, Chow responds that Antoinette should know because she was there.
Frank says she doesn't know and retreats back into the restaurant. Inside, Wayne Favre checks Ronnie Williams, but there's no pulse.
Williams has suffered 3 shots, the first of which came from less than 2 feet away to the right side of his neck, which would have killed him instantly.
Yvonne walks Chow back inside to the kitchen to check on Ha and Kwan. They're both lying on the ground, dead.
Yvonne watches in shock as Antoinette walks back and forth all over the crime scene, which is against standard protocol.
Wayne comes back into the kitchen and asks Antoinette about the supposed masked gunmen. She claims they fled down Bullard Avenue in a dark car.
All 3 officers then escort Chow back into the dining area. Yvonne asks who might have done this to her family. Chow describes a short black man with gold teeth and says he came into the restaurant earlier with Antoinette.
Sergeant Eddie Rance and Detective Marco Dema of the Homicide Unit arrive at Kim An around 2:30 a.m.
Officer Williams' body has been removed from the scene. Detective Dema finds his empty holster on top of the bar. He also learns Williams' wallet was nowhere to be found. Dema assesses the situation as a robbery gone wrong, especially after Chow informs him the money she hid in the microwave was gone.
Behind the bar, near the spot where cops find Williams' body, investigators find empty 9mm shell casings. They find similar casings and bullet fragments all over the kitchen near the bodies of Ha and Kwan Vu.
The gunman fired more than 9 shots at the siblings. Ha suffered at least 2 shots to the head. Kwong had multiple gunshot wounds to his head and chest.
While CSI processes the crime scene, Sergeant Rance sits down with Antoinette Frank.
Rance asks Frank to recount the events of the evening. She admits to being at the restaurant earlier before the shooting to eat with her nephew.
Frank claims they left, but she came back later. As she was getting a drink from the kitchen, she heard gunshots coming from the dining room, which sprang her into action, ushering the employees out of the back door. Ha and Kwong didn't listen and stayed in the kitchen.
Rance asks Frank why she drove to the station to report the shooting instead of calling it in on a radio or cell phone. The question flusters Frank, who doesn't really have an explanation.
Rance leaves Frank to get the rundown from Chow and Kwok, who's returned from his friend's house.
Kwok explains how he and Chow hid in the freezer, while Antoinette and her nephew ran around the restaurant yelling, shooting, and rummaging through the area where the family usually stored the cash.
Neither Kwok nor Chow saw who pulled the trigger, but Kwok confirms there were no masked gunmen, which leads Rance to return to the dining room to confront Frank about her account.
Frank finally admits that her nephew is actually 18-year-old Rogers Lacaze and says he was in the car when she returned to the restaurant for the 3rd time that night. She didn't want him coming inside because he'd recently talked about robbing the place.
Detective Dema comes over and asks Antoinette if she has a firearm with her.
Antoinette says no, but when Dema pats her down, she lifts a .38 caliber handgun from the waistband of her pants. He subsequently places her under arrest for murder.
Just before 4 a.m., as cops transport Frank to police headquarters, she gives up a couple of addresses where they can find Rogers Lacaze.
Minutes later, officers surround the apartment of Lacaze's brother in Gretna. They take Rogers into custody without incident. He's shocked and scared to learn that Antoinette has him twisted up in a murder investigation.
New Orleans Police Headquarters, Saturday, March 4th, 1995. 6 a.m. Detectives formally interview Kwok and Chow Vu.
Kwok explains how Antoinette came into the restaurant 3 times that night. The second time, there was a gold-toothed man with her. She called her nephew. The nephew kept staring at him and made him nervous.
Kwok says Antoinette somehow obtained Chow's keys, which she used to let herself in the 3rd time she returned to the restaurant. He claims the gold-toothed man did the shooting while Antoinette watched, but both of them participated in searching the restaurant for cash.
Chow adds how Antoinette had lied to Officer Yvonne Favre that she didn't know what had happened. She and her brother both picked Rogers Lacaze out of a photo lineup as the shooter.
Meanwhile, officers execute a search warrant on the apartment Lacaze shares with his girlfriend, Renee Brady.
Inside a bedroom dresser, they find a box of .380 ammo and an NOPD summons dated January 30th for failure to control his vehicle. The issuing officer was Ronnie Williams.
Investigators asked Renee where Rogers was the previous evening. She claims he was home with her until 1 a.m. Then he went to Mr. C's pool hall with his brother Michael till 2. After that, Rogers stayed at Michael's across the river in Gretna. The officers know Renee's lying.
At 7 a.m., Sergeant Eddie Rance and detectives Marco Demma and Richard Marino interrogate Antoinette Frank.
Antoinette verified that she and Rogers ate at Kim Arn. She claimed it was Rogers' idea to eat in the restaurant, that was when he started shooting. Her colleagues know she's lying, as Kwok and Chow were clear that she'd come back later with a stolen key.
Antoinette maintains that she led people out of the restaurant when the shooting went down, then went back inside to check on Ronnie Williams. She claims that's when Rogers went into the kitchen and shot Ha and Kwong Vu.
Antoinette is adamant she never touched or fired any weapon.
According to Frank, Rogers looked for money but didn't find any, so they left. As they drove away, he allegedly threatened to kill her if she talked.
Frank is repeatedly asked if she pulled her weapon or used her police training in any way. She responds by saying that when she finally thought to do so, Rogers had his gun in her face and said he'd shoot her.
Just before 9 a.m., Demma, Rance, and Detective Patrick Young go in on 18-year-old Rogers Lacaze.
Rogers blames the whole thing on Antoinette, saying it all began when she and Chow had words, possibly over Antoinette's off-duty security hours being given to Ronnie Williams. Rogers says Antoinette told him, "I'm going to get that mother effer."
Rogers claims Antoinette fired the first shots while he was standing near the doorway. Then she went into the kitchen and shot the others. The detectives know this is false, as she had her hands on Chow and Kwok, per their statements, as the first shots rang out.
Rogers says after they left, Antoinette dropped him off at his apartment and said she was going to report the crime to the station because nobody would ever believe she was involved.
Demma asks Lacaze what guns they had with them.
Lacaze says Antoinette gave him a .38 while she had a 9mm she'd taken out of evidence lockup and reported stolen 2 weeks prior. This implies premeditation.
Investigators end their interview with Rogers and immediately take a second crack at Antoinette.
After briefing Antoinette on Rogers' allegations against her, she admits the night before the shooting, Rogers asked her about robbing Kim Arn. She says she told him it was a bad idea because of the police presence, but took him there to get some food nevertheless.
According to Frank, as they were about to pull out of the parking lot after eating, Rogers insisted he needed something to drink. That's when she went back, knocked on the door, and Ronnie Williams motioned for her to come in.
Frank claims that when she went back to see Chow about getting the drinks, Rogers snuck in and began shooting.
Seconds later, he appeared at the back of the restaurant where she was and said several times, "Shoot those mother effers." Frank says Rogers handed her one of the 2 guns he had, and it went off in her hand.
When the detectives ask Frank to clarify, she finally confesses that she shot Ha and Kwon Vu, but Kwon didn't die until Lacaze shot him multiple times to finish him off.
Frank says that after the shooting, the Cars took his gun back and they searched the restaurant for money. She insists he held a gun to her back the whole time, so she couldn't pull a weapon.
Several days later, ballistics tests come back indicating that the shells found near the bodies of Ronnie Williams, Kwong Vu, and Ha Vu all came from the 9mm Beretta Frank had reported stolen just weeks earlier.
Gretna, Louisiana, Saturday, March 25, 1995, 2 a.m. Law enforcement executes a no-knock search warrant on the apartment of Rogers Lacaze's brother, Michael.
As officers spread out through the residence, they quickly find a piece of paper with handwritten notes on the back. It's a list of Rogers' supposed activities on the evening of March 3rd into the early morning hours of the 4th.
The list reads, 8:45 p.m., Shoney's. 9 to 9:10, went to Antoinette's house. 9:20, watching TV and talking on the phone. 12:45 to 1 a.m., Michael picks up to go to Mr. C's pool hall. 1:05 to 1:55 a.m., playing pool. 2 to 2:15 a.m., return home.
Officers interview Michael Lacaze on the spot. He says the timeline was made up by Rogers' girlfriend so they could all corroborate the same alibi. An alibi he admits isn't true.
According to Michael, his brother sent him a page at around 2 a.m. on the night of the shooting. When Michael returned the page, Rogers told him he needed to be picked up as something bad had happened involving Antoinette.
Michael swung by Renee's place and asked what happened. Rogers told him Antoinette knocked on the door of Kim Arn, an officer opened it, and he shot the officer. Rogers claimed Antoinette shot some other people inside, but some got away.
On Monday, March 27th, Detective Marco Dema visits the Chevron near Michael Lacaz's apartment.
2 days prior, Mary Williams, the widow of Officer Ronnie Williams, had called NOPD to report a suspicious $15.29 charge on his credit card statement. The charge was from the Chevron on the night of the shooting and couldn't have been executed by Ronnie.
Dema and clerk John Ross spend 2 hours sifting through a bag of old transaction receipts until they find a mysterious charge, which is timestamped 2:29 a.m.
Dema shows Ross a six-pack. He identifies Rogers Lacaz as the person who made the $15.29 gas purchase just hours after the shooting at Kim On.
Ross tells Dema he's certain it was Rogers because he sees him and his brother Michael frequently at the gas station.
On April 28, 1995, an Orleans Parish grand jury indicts Rogers Lacaz and Antoinette Frank on 3 counts of first-degree murder each for the killings of Ronnie Williams, Quan Vu, and Ha Vu.
Rogers and Antoinette's trials are separated and put on the docket for a fast turnaround.
During the 4-month lead-up to trial, prosecutors scrambled to figure out the relationship between Frank and Lacaz and how it led to murder.
Antoinette Frank was born in Opelousas, Louisiana in April 1971 and raised alongside 3 brothers.
Antoinette splits her time in high school between McDonough, New Orleans, and Opelousas High in Opelousas. At both schools, she shows an interest in law enforcement. Graduating in 1989,
in April 1991, 20-year-old Antoinette applies to the New Orleans Police Department. As part of the screening, she undergoes 2 psychological exams.
Dr. Penelope Drawl gives Antoinette the lowest possible score for tolerance, open-mindedness, and impulse control, and the next to lowest ranking on stability, maturity, and probable adjustment to police work. Drawl detects Antoinette has problems with authority.
Dr. Philip Scuria concludes that Antoinette is unacceptable with regard to integrity and forthrightness. He determines that she's unfit for the police academy.
Frank spends the next several months campaigning to redeem herself with the NOPD. She obtains multiple letters of recommendation, which may or may not have been forgeries. She also gets a second opinion on her psych evaluation, which she passes in November 1992.
The police academy accepts Cadet Frank despite the warning signs. She earns her badge by August 1993.
Frank's first 4 months go horribly. She doesn't get along with her assigned partners, and the training officer suggests that she return to the academy.
Then, on November 25, 1994, Antoinette and her partner respond to a shooting.
As a result of a dope deal gone wrong, Rogers Lacaz is en route to the hospital with serious wounds. Lacaz had been dealing drugs since dropping out of high school in 10th grade.
A few days after the incident, Frank presents a photo lineup to Lacaz at the hospital and ends up befriending him.
Over the ensuing 3 months, she chauffeurs him to look for work, buys him clothes, and gets him a pager and a cell phone.
Against protocol, Antoinette lets Rogers ride in the squad car and even move it. Earlier, on the night of the Kim On shooting, she had even brought him along on a residential call and referred to him as a trainee.
By the end of that night, Rogers had taught Antoinette more about being a criminal than she taught him about being a cop, as 3 people were dead and thousands of dollars were missing.
New Orleans, Louisiana, Monday, July 17, 1995. The Rogers Lacaz murder trial begins at Orleans Parish Criminal Court.
The manager of Mr. C's pool hall testifies that he saw Michael Lacaz at the establishment on March 4th, but definitely did not see Rogers.
2 clerks from the New Orleans East Walmart state that on March 3rd, 1995, Antoinette and Rogers inquired about buying ammo for a 9mm handgun. Neither Antoinette nor Rogers owned a 9, except potentially the gun Antoinette reported stolen from police lockup.
Chow Vu takes the stand.
She points out Rogers Lacaz as the person she saw shooting at the restaurant.
The defense counters Chow's testimony by raising the possibility that Antoinette's brother, Adam Jr., was her accomplice, not Rogers. Adam has a criminal record, but it's physically obvious no one would mistake 5'2" Rogers for 6'5" Adam Frank Jr.
Lacaz sticks with his alibi and insists he didn't buy gas with Ronnie Williams' credit card, the possession of which is damning proof that he'd been at the crime scene.
But on cross-examination, Lacaz trips up by admitting he'd been with Antoinette Frank when she ordered food from Kim On. The order came in at 12:51 a.m., at which time he claimed he was already at the pool hall with his brother.
On July 21st, 1995, the jury convicts Rogers Lacaz on 3 counts of first-degree murder. He's sentenced to the death penalty.
Orleans Parish Criminal Court, Tuesday, September 5th, 1995. Disgraced cop Antoinette Frank stands trial for the murders of Ronnie Williams, Ha Vu, and Quan Vu.
Prosecutors theorized that Frank's motive for murder was her anger about getting cut out of the paid off-duty security detail at Kim On.
Frank's defense team paints her as an innocent woman who tried to help a troubled young man, Roger LeCarve, but ended up being forced to participate in his schemes.
The state's case against Antoinette Frank is virtually identical to the one they presented against LeCarve, with one major exception: her interrogation tape.
The damning tape clearly shows Antoinette admitting to shooting Ha and Quang Vu.
Frank's defense team has subpoenaed almost 40 witnesses, but don't call on any of them to testify. Antoinette does not take the stand in her own defense.
On September 12th, the jury takes just 22 minutes to find Antoinette Frank guilty on 3 counts of first-degree murder. They recommend the death penalty, which the judge affirms.
In 2000, Frank appeals her conviction, arguing that prior abuse could have been a mitigating factor in her case.
She tells a forensic psychiatrist that her father displayed bizarre and physically threatening behavior, including an incident where he killed a family pet in front of her.
Antoinette also alleges he sexually abused her from age 9 to 19, which resulted in multiple aborted pregnancies.
In November 1995, 8 months after Frank had been sent to prison on murder charges, police recovered male human remains from a shallow grave beneath her home. The man's skull had a gunshot wound.
No attempts are ever made to ID the remains, but many suspect they belong to Antoinette's father. His alleged abuse theoretically could have damaged her psyche prior to Kim On triple homicide.
Because Antoinette had refused pretrial meetings with mitigation experts, the judge denies her appeal. Canyon Lake, California, Wednesday, February 16, 1994, 9 a.m. Alice Williams calls her friend Norma Davis to check in. The 2 retirees are neighbors in a gated lakefront community.
Alice is growing increasingly worried, as she's been trying to reach her 86-year-old friend since the previous day, and there continues to be no answer.
Alice walks over to Norma's and knocks on the door, which swings open.
The house is quiet and everything appears to be in order. Alice finds Norma's purse by the fridge. Her pill box is on the counter.
Inside Norma's bedroom, which is on the first floor, Alice sees a pile of purses that have been thrown out onto the floor.
Alice makes her way to the 2nd floor. There in the den, she finds Norma seated in her favorite recliner in front of the TV. But something isn't right.
As Alice comes closer, she sees her friend has been stabbed with 2 knives. One knife is lodged in Norma's chest. The other remains stuck in her neck and has almost decapitated her.
Norma doesn't appear to be breathing. Horrified, Alice now retrieves the closest phone and calls 911.
The Paris Police Department sends 2 officers to the scene.
The officers check Norma Davis, but it's too late to save her. They tape off the scene and wait for homicide to arrive.
Rookie Detective Joe Greco is assigned the case. He shows up minutes later. Riverside County Deputy DA Richard Bentley and a team of investigators soon arrive to provide support.
Around 11:45 a.m., investigators begin processing the Davis home.
Senior criminalist Ricky Cooksey spots markings on the floor by the entryway. He turns off the lights, shines a flashlight on the area, and then notices a shoe imprint pointing toward the kitchen.
The imprint clearly came from a Nike athletic shoe. They measure it at a size 6, which means it either belongs to a small man or a woman.
Forensic technicians dust for prints and bag several items as evidence, including a severed phone cord and a half-empty knife block from the kitchen.
Greco and Bentley suspect Norma Davis was killed after she'd fallen asleep watching TV, as there are absolutely no indications that she fought back against her attacker.
Meanwhile, outside the condo, Norma's former daughter-in-law, Jerry Armbrust, and Jerry's husband, Russell, are waiting to speak to a detective.
Detective Greco and Deputy DA Bentley escort the couple to a squad car to talk in private. As soon as Bentley and Greco get into the car, they immediately notice Jerry is wearing a pair of white Nike sneakers.
Jerry then explains how she's remained close to Norma even after Norma's son died and she'd gotten remarried to Russell. Jerry had actually taken it upon herself to oversee Norma's care.
Jerry tells Greco and Bentley she was last at Norma's house 3 days earlier, on Sunday, when she dropped off some groceries at 6 p.m.
Jerry says she didn't see Norma, although she assumed Norma was upstairs watching television because she heard the TV.
Greco finds Jerry's emotional state a bit odd. For someone claiming to be close to the victim, she doesn't seem all that broken up about the entire situation.
Back inside the condo, the forensics team conducts a final examination of Norma Davis's body.
They take tape lifts from Norma's clothing in the hopes of retrieving prints, fibers, or DNA. They also underneath her fingernails in the event they contain any of the killer's DNA.
As they move Norma's body, investigators notice she suffered multiple additional stab wounds that were previously hidden.
Greco and Bentley find the facts and evidence puzzling. The elderly woman had been overkilled, but her home has not been ransacked and nothing appears to have been stolen.
The following afternoon, the coroner releases a preliminary report indicating Norma Davis died on Monday, February 14th, 2 days before Alice Williams found her body.
Detective Greco visits Jerry Armbrust at home, hoping to glean additional insight. Jerry willingly answers all of his questions and even provides various documents illustrating Norma's medical conditions. By the end of the conversation, Greco eliminates Armbrust off his suspect list.
Canyon Lake, California, Monday, February 28, 1994, 6:18 p.m. 3 women knock on the door of June Roberts' mobile home. They're taking June out to celebrate her 66th birthday.
June doesn't answer the door. One of the women heads for the golf cart under her carport and retrieves the keys to her house.
The women let themselves inside and find June dead in the den. They call the police in a panic.
Detective Greco and Sergeant Wyatt McLevan respond to the scene. Inside the house, they find June Roberts on a carpet underneath a heavy chair.
It appears June has been violently attacked and strangled with a curly telephone cord, which remains wrapped around her neck. It's a ligature. The other end of the cord is secured to one arm of the chair. June's face is bloody and swollen. The officers suspect that she had been hit on the head with a heavy wine decanter, which had crushed the left side of her skull, yet no defensive wounds are apparent.
Greco and McKelvin walk through the mobile home.
They spot June Roberts' pocketbook on the dryer. Next to it, there's a small red leather purse, which is open and looks as though someone has rifled through a pile of credit cards. Technicians dust the purse and cards for prints.
Detective Greco is immediately struck by the similarities between this murder and the killing of Norma Davis 2 weeks prior.
Both homicides took place in broad daylight, which is unusual. Both women's homes had been rummaged through, yet not ransacked, so robbery does not appear to be the ulterior motive. However, the killer did in fact remove the phone cords from the walls of both of the residences.
Norma Davis did not have a phone cord wrapped around her neck like June Roberts. However, it's suspected she had been manually strangled in addition to suffering blunt force trauma to the head.
On Monday, March 7th, Detective Greco receives a call from one of June Roberts' daughters, who explains there's been unusual activity on one of her mother's credit cards.
Investigators immediately start running down the charges.
Before long, cops visit Bailey's Wine Country Cafe. A waiter there tells them that a blonde-haired woman used June Roberts' visa on the 28th. The woman was a smoker and had a boy with her who appeared to be 5 years old.
When detectives visit nearby Esthétique's hair salon, they learn a blonde-haired woman used June's visa there that same day to charge $167.76.
A hairdresser says the woman went by the name June Roberts and had a little blonde-haired boy with her who referred to her as his second mommy.
Another hairdresser says the same woman came back a week later wanting her hair dyed red, but she told the woman she wouldn't do it because her hair was too damaged.
Cops end up tracking the suspicious blonde woman to more than half a dozen stores.
Detective Greco comes to the stark realization that he is now dealing with a serial killer, targeting elderly women in this small area of Southern California.
On February 16, 1994, 86-year-old Norma Davis is found brutally stabbed and strangled to death in her Canyon Lake, California condo. 12 days later, 66-year-old June Roberts is found bludgeoned and strangled to death in her mobile home less than 2 miles away. In the aftermath of the Roberts killing, cops do identify a possible suspect, a woman who's using Roberts' stolen credit card at businesses around Riverside County.
Every store they visit, officers get the same description of a blonde-haired woman, a little taller than 5 feet, age 35 to 40, passing herself off as June Roberts.
On March 11th, Detective Greco visits a woman named Dorinda Hawkins, who'd been attacked by a woman at an antique store in nearby Lake Elsinore.
According to Hawkins, a woman came into the store on March 10th. The woman followed her back to look at some framed pictures. Then, without warning, the woman slipped a nylon cord around her neck and started choking her while forcing her down to the floor.
Hawkins tried to kick off her assailant and pleaded for her life. When she asked the woman why she was doing this, the woman answered, "I'm not doing this for the money."
Hawkins subsequently blacked out. When she woke up 45 minutes later, she dialed 911. The only things missing were $25 from the register and a key she wore around her wrist. Hawkins later described her attacker as being a short woman with blonde hair.
5 days later, on Wednesday, March 16th, Detective Greco receives an unexpected call from Jerry Armbrust that blows the case wide open.
Jerry now believes the suspect could be her stepdaughter, 37-year-old Dana Sue Gray. Dana just happens to be 5 feet 2 inches tall, blonde hair. Believe it or not, she recently dyed it red.
Norma Davis happens to be Dana's step-grandmother. Dana's also familiar with June Roberts. Apparently, Dana has keys to Norma's condo.
According to Armbrust, Dana now lives with her boyfriend and his 5-year-old son not far from where Dorinda Hawkins was attacked. Her home is also close to a Save-On drugstore where June Roberts' credit card was utilized.
Sun City, California, Wednesday, March 16th, 1994, 1:30 p.m. Louis Dorman knocks on the door of his 87-year-old girlfriend Dora's house. She doesn't answer, so Louis lets himself in. He only makes it a few steps before he finds Dora sprawled on the ground near the bathroom.
Riverside County Sheriff's dispatched Deputy Diane Stewart to the scene. She notices now that Dora has multiple bruises and cuts on her arms. There's a 4-inch gash at the back of her head. A blood-smeared Princess telephone with its cord tied into a slip knot is positioned underneath her left leg.
Blood covers the bathroom walls. Oddly, there's an iron sitting inside the bathroom sink underneath the bloody washcloth, which is over the faucet.
Before long, Detective Chris Antoniadis arrives on the scene and takes the lead.
Based on blood smears and overturned furniture, it appears the killer used the phone cord to drag the victim from the bedroom to the bathroom, then struck her here multiple times with the iron.
Dora's large black purse is unzipped, and it's sitting on her bed. Her wallet is missing. Someone has rifled through a desk drawer and pulled out some statements from the Provident Bank.
Simultaneously, 2 towns over in Lake Elsinore, Detective Greco has a surveillance team tracking Dana Sue Gray's every move.
Covert officers follow her to a Provident Bank drive-up window where she carries out a transaction.
By the late afternoon, with the tail ongoing, Greco gets a signed search warrant for Gray's house. He notifies the field team to be ready to apprehend Dana Sue for questioning.
Lake Elsinore, California, Wednesday, March 16th, 1994, 6 p.m. Detective Joe Greco knocks on Dana Sue Gray's door. A team of officers has the house surrounded.
When Dana opens the door, all Greco says is, "I think you know what this is about." Dana is then handcuffed and taken to a waiting police car.
The authorities haul Gray off and then execute a search warrant on her residence. Detective Greco and Deputy DA Richard Bentley find an abundance of items that have been purchased with June Roberts' stolen credit card. They also found various ropes and gloves.
Detectives interrogate Dana Sue Gray later that evening at police headquarters.
The officers asked Dana about the items they recovered from her home, which had invariably been charged to June Roberts' stolen credit card. Dana claims she knows nothing about those charges or credit cards. The officers confront her about how they followed her to the same Provident Bank branch used by Dora Beebe. Dana responds by saying she found a woman's purse on a dirt road with a bank book in it belonging to a Betty or Beebe.
When Bentley presses Dana, she alters her story, claiming now that she found both the credit cards and the bank book.
Dana finally admits she used June Roberts' credit cards and withdrew $2,000 from Dora Beebe's account. She also admits that she took some of Dora Beebe's credit cards. Yet, Dana repeatedly says she couldn't kill anyone.
The interrogation drags into the early morning hours of Thursday, March 17th. A sobbing Dana eventually offers a third version of her story, stating how she found Dora Beebe already dead inside her home. So, she took Dora's purse because she needed the money anyway.
Riverside County Sheriff's Detectives Chris Antoniadis and Mark Cordova, who are leading the Dora Beebe murder and the Dorinda Hawkins assault investigations, soon joined the interrogation.
Antoniadis and Cordova tell Dana they have a witness who saw her leaving Dora's house around the time it's believed the killing transpired.
They have enough evidence to charge her with Beebe's murder, as well as the Hawkins assault. However, Detective Greco steps in, handcuffs Dana, and places her under arrest for the murder of June Roberts. She's subsequently transferred to county jail.
In the weeks after Gray's arrest, law enforcement digs into her background.
Dana Sue Armbrust was born on December 6, 1957 in Pasadena, California. Her mother, Beverly, was allegedly an aggressive, vain, former beauty queen who frequently maxed out her husband's credit cards.
Dana's parents divorced when she's 2 years old. Dana rarely sees her father after that. What she does witness is her mother dating a string of men. So throughout her childhood, she acts out to get attention.
Whenever Beverly tries to discipline her, Dana retaliates by stealing money or flying into fits of violence. After Dana's mom dies of breast cancer when she's 14, there's really nobody else to provide any semblance of control over her.
Dana attends Newport Harbor High. She never applies herself in class, but is introduced to skydiving, which she loves.
After graduating in 1976, Dana eventually moves in with her skydiving instructor, Rob. He helps her graduate from nursing school in 1981, but the romance doesn't last.
On October 1987, Dana marries pilot Tom Gray. Her shopping habits quickly have them living well beyond their means. They end up filing for bankruptcy and lose their house in Canyon Lake.
To save her marriage, Dana tries to have a child, but suffers multiple miscarriages, the last of which is in March of 1992. After that, Dana starts drinking heavily.
In 1993, Dana files for divorce and moves in with her new boyfriend and his young son.
That November, Dana is fired from the hospital where she works. Allegedly, she stole opiate painkillers, which she later claims she needed as a result of her depression from the last miscarriage.
During her unemployment, Dana, the former adrenaline junkie, turns to a more dangerous coping mechanism, murdering elderly women and using their money to fund shopping sprees.
On April 8, 1994, a Riverside County grand jury indicts Dana Sue Gray.
Dana pleads not guilty to all charges. She is now held behind bars at Riverside County Jail.
Not only did Dorinda Hawkins identify Dana as the person who attacked her, but cops had also recovered Hawkins' key from Dana's home.
Dana had admitted to using June Roberts' credit cards and Dora Beebe's bank checks, in addition to the eyewitness statements of multiple clerks and cashiers, which connect Dana to the killings. Police had also recovered the items she purchased with the stolen credit cards from within her home.
To keep things moving, the DA decides against filing charges against Dana for the murder of Norma Davis.
Riverside, California, Friday, March 10, 1995. Dana Sue Gray enters Superior Court and shocks the prosecution by changing her plea from not guilty to not guilty by reason of insanity.
Everything hangs on the mental health evaluations of Dana Sue Gray. The defense has had two psychiatrists, Dr. Michael Kania and Dr. Lorna Forbes. They examined Dana for a total of 25 sessions. The prosecution turns to Dr. Martha Rogers to evaluate Gray, and that takes place on April 12th.
Dana offers various explanations for why she committed each attack.
Gray tells Dr. Rogers that Dorinda Hawkins provoked her at the antique store by making comments that made her feel ridiculed and rejected. Dorinda reminded her of her mother, quote, in her alcoholic stage.
Gray says she felt nauseous after the attack, but quickly overcame it and visited a beauty salon later that afternoon.
According to Dana, family friend June Roberts had become so critical of her marriage to Tom Gray that she just lost it.
She lost control because June had made her feel worthless. As for the day she killed Dora Beebe, well, Dana had told Dr. Kania she felt despondent, then angry when Beebe supposedly told her she didn't have time to give her directions. Dana claims that she killed Beebe and stole her wallet and bank book. She felt an overwhelming need to shop, which provided comfort.
Both defense experts determined Dana Sue Gray was legally insane at the time of her crimes. Dr. Kania concludes Gray was suffering from severe psychotic depression and underlying alcoholism.
Dr. Forbes finds that Gray had no